got new folks joining us, and I want to just do a little bit of a recap, and I want to interact with you a little bit here. And let me just start actually by engaging you a little bit. What is the Constitution and what is its purpose? Anybody chime in on that? What is the Constitution and what is its purpose?
To form the federal government and tell it what the rules are.
Yeah, exactly right. So in a nutshell, it established the national or the federal government, specifies what that federal government's permitted to do. And those things that are not specifically outlined for the federal government, where does that power reside?
The states and the people.
States and the people. And what amendment's that?
Oh, come on. This is too hard. It's
That's the 10th Amendment.
Yeah.
Come on, Brandon. Don't push me. Don't push me. That's it, right. It's exactly right. 10th Amendment. And so what is, so that outlines the parameters of the Constitution, but kind of a higher level perspective. What is the purpose of the Constitution? We want to limit authority of the government, but why are we limiting authority? What's the game plan here, so to speak?
I think it's to make them stay within boundaries so they don't just usurp power out of thin air and do whatever they want.
Yeah, I would say to prevent tyranny. That was me kind of my statement.
Yeah, you want to prevent tyranny, and if you prevent tyranny, you maximize liberty for the people, right?
Preserve liberty.
But yeah, we're preserving liberty. And if we're going to have government, right, this is one of the big debates that I'm finding myself involved in on a day-to-day basis as I put out content is, well, do we really need government? And that we're not going to have that debate tonight, but we're going to go with this idea that, yeah, we're going to have government. And if we're going to have government, what is the job of government? And how do we best maximize liberty under a governmental system? Now, I'm beginning with the foundational document of the Declaration of Independence. It tells us that to secure these rights, what rights are being discussed? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And so that really, that's the why, if you will. Constitution comes into play and establishes that government that's being referred to in the Declaration of Independence. So we're getting there, guys. I'm just establishing. I want the new folks to know that we're not just diving into a topic. I want everybody to know the foundation upon which we're going to operate as we engage in this discussion, which, by the way, is going to be a lot of fun. It's actually a subject that I'm pretty passionate about that none of you have ever heard me discuss. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. So with that being said, Don Dickinson, I know you had your hand raised and you are going to chime in. Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, I was going to say that the purpose of the Constitution, not just reining in or restraining government, but why? Pretty much the unchecked tyranny, obviously, of the monarchy at the time. Just the capricious, the monarchy.
Yeah.
The changing of the rules at the drop of a hat. It's to do that today. It takes some sort of department, like Department of Education or something like that.
Well, Don, hey, I really appreciate you bringing up that thought because it's something that we don't oftentimes discuss, and that's the importance of a written constitution. That there's a rule book, that it's just not random and arbitrary depending on who's in office. Now, I know some of you are laughing, right? You're keeping a straight face, but you're laughing because you're like, Shane, isn't that kind of the way it is right now? Yeah, there's that valid point, right? We have individuals in government that are disregarding the Constitution, running their own show, and the people are at fault for that. The people are at fault. Like we want to talk about the politicians are the problem. Well, if I could be so bold as to say the politicians aren't the problem, we the people are the problem. The symptom is the politicians that we send to office. And so often we spend time dealing with the symptom as opposed to a problem. And why do I say we the people are the problem? Well, because going back to that foundational document of the Declaration of Independence, it says to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. But the very next sentence, it says deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So if we buy into that philosophy, which I certainly do, then the foundation is we the people. They derive their powers to govern from us. And if they abuse those powers, ultimately we're on the hook for it. And I think that actually is quite the good news. That's quite the good news when you're talking about solutions, because we the people can drive this train, and it's going to be hard work. I'm not under any sort of illusion that that this problem is going to be easy to fix. But if we begin this idea of self-governance, that there is hope to be found there. So, all right, moving ahead. What is this idea of a constitutional republic? Well, I want to hit on that foundation, then we're going to move in to some hard-hitting stuff that I'm excited about. What is the idea of a constitutional republic as guaranteed to every state under Article 4, Section 4? Silence. Let's go. What is it, guys? What, when we talk about a Republican form of government, what kind of government are we talking about as compared to a democracy or a monarchy or an aristocracy or any form, an oligarchy? What's
to preserve the rights of the individual so that the majority doesn't take over. It actually prevents mobocracy.
Okay.
Representatives.
So let me ask you this. Do we have elements of a democracy? Do we have democratic components within our Constitution?
Yes.
Shane, let me just back up just a sec here. A republic is essentially an entity or that is put together by multiple sovereign entities, a decentralization of authority, and the entire concept. You have to follow back to on that line of authority essentially. And if you've stated it in the preamble where it says that, you know, we the people, and that authority comes from the people, so you follow that line back. The authority comes from the people. Where does it go? Now the first assumption is you can never reverse that authority. It comes from the people. It flows from that point on. And then if you form a republic, you're obviously going through, we have free and independent states, which the colonies became. Those colonies essentially established a republic, supposedly a republic, which basically retained that line of authority from the individual through their states, their free and independent states, to a federal authority. But that federal authority was still subject to that line of authority, which goes back to the individual. And it's an increasing, it's not an increasing, it's a decreasing amount of authority essentially, because it starts with the individual, goes to a state, and then extends to the state. It doesn't get more powerful as it goes on. It gets less powerful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for chiming in, Joe. Within this idea of a republic is a federalist structure, principles of federalism, principles found in the 10th Amendment, right? That relationship between the states and the people, and ultimately the federal government. A republic, right, is one state among many states that are essentially running their own show, subject to authority that we have given to the federal government through the Constitution. So I appreciate you bringing that idea. What are anybody else want to chime in on the essence of a republic? What makes this different in addition to what Joe talked about?
Well, if I could tag on to what Joe said, doesn't the 17th Amendment effectively gut that line of authority, that line of power?
Well,
the direct election.
Everything after the 10th Amendment guts that authority.
But, you know, to your point, Don, I mean, the 17th Amendment, just to bring everybody up to speed, the 17th, when the Constitution was originally ratified, you had the people deciding who the members of the House of Representatives would be, right? So we showed up to vote. The state legislatures would determine who the members of the Senate would be. You'd have two individuals representing each state, and the state legislators made that decision, right? So now you have the people being represented through the House, and you have the state interests being represented through the state legislatures via the Senate. Fascinating idea, phenomenal idea. And then, of course, the 17th Amendment comes along and guts that part. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it guts the republic. Does it slice and dice it up a little bit? But the republic didn't cease to exist because of the 17th Amendment. By the way, I'm all in on getting rid of the 17th Amendment. Let's get it back to the way that it originally was, so that the states can have a legitimate interest. But I wouldn't take the position that it does away with the republic. And I think there's a lot of evidence out there to support this idea that the principles of the republic are still alive and well. The Roe v. Wade decision, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, is a perfect example of a constitutional republic at play. Maybe we'll get into that here in just a moment. But let's go back to this idea. What are the distinctions between your conventional democracy and a constitutional republic? I'm asking this question a couple of times over because this is going to be critical to understanding. That's going to be critical to really debating what I'm about to bring up here in a moment. So how does a republic distinguish from a democracy?
Well,
Well,
in
democracy
my
is a
opinion,
majority.
it's that you elect representatives to represent you versus the people just voting, on a line vote, 51% to 49%.
Okay, very good, Jim.
As opposed
Right
to
on
mob
board.
rule.
And Mike, I heard you say mob rule. Let me allow
I
you
said
to
as
go on to what Jim
representative.
said.
Yeah, it's representative as opposed to mob rule.
Okay,
So
so
we elect them to
um,
represent us rather than
that-
letting everybody just rule as a mob.
very good. Thank you, Mike. And that is one. Listen, this is one essential principle that we always hear people talk about, and it's an important one, and it's a valid one, and it's a true one. Oftentimes, though, what we're hearing out there when you and I call it a constitutional republic, someone else out there will say, well, you're just playing with words. Well, it's a representative democracy. It's a democratic republic. Again, when we talk about a representative democracy, that is only one half of the equation of a constitutional republic, because it is true. We do have some democratic components that are found within a republic. We vote in individuals who are supposed to act in our interest and are supposed to secure the rights of the people. But the other half of the equation that most people are misinformed on, I'm not referring to you, I'm talking about the general public, is this idea that a republic really captures the interplay between the law and the people and how we go about protecting liberty. So even though we vote in individuals to represent us, those individuals aren't permitted to vote on what rights you and I enjoy. We don't allow majorities to show up to decide what rights the little guy gets to enjoy. So it's important that we keep that in mind. In fact, let me ask you a little bit of a curveball here. When we talk about a republic, again, there are democratic components involved. We vote in individuals, but there are some anti-majoritarian principles that are really important. Can anybody think of, as you kind of navigate your way through the Constitution, can you think of anything in the Constitution that is a reflection of anti-majoritarian principles? Because this idea of a republic is found, it's interwoven throughout the Constitution. And where would be an example that you might think of off the top of your head? Anti-majoritarian principle. Can you think of anyone? I know it's a bit of a curveball. And when I tell you, every single person will recognize it. You'll be like, of course. Like, of course that's it. But can anybody think of anything off the top of your head?
The Senate, you get 2 senators per state, no matter how many people are in the state.
Very good. Absolutely. What about electoral college? Is the electoral college potentially an anti-majoritarian principle?
Absolutely, yeah. Because without
Absolutely,
the electoral college, all the major cities would just rule us all.
Yeah. So that's an anti-majoritarian principle. What else? I'm going to give you a hint. Bill of Rights. Anything in the Bill of Rights that is anti-majoritarian in nature.
Freedom of religion.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and it goes, what are the first couple words of the First Amendment? What are the
Congress shall
first
make
4
no
words?
law. Damn it, I
There
can't
it is.
remember.
No, that's exactly right, Brandon. Congress shall make no law.
Yeah.
Guys, that's an anti-majoritarian principle at play. This is a constitutional republic being solidified through the First Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Anti-majoritarian principle. So that First Amendment talks about, just as you said, Kathy, free exercise of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of the press, and then, of course, the right to petition. The right to petition also would be an anti-majoritarian principle because it allows the minority, potentially, to step up and say, I don't like what's going on here, resolve the dispute. But does this make sense? When we're talking about Congress shall make no law, abridging the freedom of speech, or let's go with the free exercise of religion, abridging the free exercise of religion, what does that mean? It means that even if the majority show up and say, this is what we would like to have. Hey, members of the House and members of the Senate, this is what your constituents are pushing for. So pass the law, right? Make it so that Christianity is the sanctioned religion of the United States. Like, let's make this a law, right? That wouldn't be okay. Congress can't make a law, because what about the little guy who says, I'm a Buddhist, right? I'm Muslim, right? Congress shall make no law abridging the free exercise of religion, regardless of what the majority might say, right? So this is, guys, by the way, I'm fascinated. I love talking about this stuff, because when I hear people want to argue about this idea, oh, come on, you're playing games. We're a representative democracy. We're a constitutional republic. They're one and the same. Emphatically, they are not. They are not. It's only half of the equation when you say representative democracy. And so then we start to dive into this idea. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What if 99% of the population showed up and said, you know what, we need to get rid of this idea of the right to keep and bear arms? Sorry. The Constitution says the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say so long as the majority agree. It just says can infringe, right? And so even if majority want to give up their guns, you're still not making a law that can infringe on what the minority might say. It's a fascinating principle, guys. So with that being said, I want to jump in with the 20 minutes or so we have left, and I want to talk about something. In fact, I'm going to be, for those of you that are going to the Arizona town hall tonight, you're going to hear me talking about this. So a little bit of a spoiler alert, but if you try and chime in on some answers tonight after hearing what we talk about, I'm throwing curveballs your way. I'm just telling you, I'm giving you a fair warning. So listen, when you look at most state constitutions west of the Mississippi, so that would include, Texas, Arizona, most of the states west of the Mississippi have some provisions outlined in that document that are antithetical to the idea of a constitutional republic. In fact, I will tell you, and the crew's going to hear me talk about it tonight, I hate the Arizona Constitution by and large. Are there some good provisions? Yeah, they've got this Declaration of Rights, which I think they've got like 158 things that are equivalent to our Bill of Rights. But there are some provisions in there that I do not like at all. And I would encourage you maybe to do some research on your own constitution. I know Texas has some of the same provisions that Arizona has, but let me just kind of give you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Arizona Constitution, but more importantly than telling you about the Constitution, I'm going to hit on some principles that I want to debate here in just a moment. Okay. So Arizona Constitution, they first apply for statehood in 1891, and it is rejected by Congress. And by the way, does anybody know where in the U.S. Constitution a state goes about, where the rules are for admission of a state into the Union? Anybody know off the top of their head? It's in the same section or in the same article as the Republic being guaranteed to every state, Article 4, right? So in Article 4, right, there's the rule book on how a state becomes a member of the Union. In 1891, Arizona applies and it's rejected. The belief was that Arizona didn't have the numbers to sustain statehood, whatever that means. Then 1910 comes around and the president is Taft. And they apply for admission again. And now the Enabling Act required both Congress and the president to be involved. Well, the president, Taft, rejects it. And the reason why he rejects it is because he doesn't like this idea of the recalling of judges. So in other words, a judge is on the bench, they're making certain decisions, and now the people don't like the way this particular judge is making decisions, the way that they're ruling. And so they have the opportunity to recall that judge, right? Basically put it on the ballot, so to speak, and they can do that. I'm coming back to that. That's one of the issues I want to debate here. By the way, we're not going to get through all the issues tonight. We'll probably continue on with this next week. It's fascinating. So Taft says, sorry, we're not accepting you as a state until you get rid of this idea of recalling judges. So 2 years later, they go about this again. They've gotten rid of it, right? The recalling of judges, and it's passed through this time. Shortly after Arizona has after they're admitted into as a state, what's one of the first things they put back into the Constitution? The recalling of judges. But in addition to the recalling of judges, Arizona also has this idea of initiatives, referendums, and recalling of individuals, not just as judges, but as state representatives. So let me just give you a little bit of back. This is what I want to debate, guys, is the recalling of judges. We'll start with that. Initiatives, referendums, and recalling of individuals that are operating in the capacity of a state representative. Okay. So this goes through, and here we are on our way. Now, here's what I find. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. There's several reasons why I don't like the Arizona Constitution, and primarily it had to do with influencers. 41 of the 52 signers of the Arizona Constitution were full-blown Democrats, which I don't have a problem with. Like those of you that are new, I'm an equal opportunity hater. I don't care if you have a D or an R behind your name. That doesn't really matter to me. Okay. But these are individuals that were instrumental in getting Woodrow Wilson in to office immediately after. So just so you understand some of the thinking that's going into this document, some of the influencers were huge supporters of Woodrow Wilson, right? 41 of the 52 are instrumental. And so what are they doing? They're taking some of these democratic components and they're implementing this into our Arizona Constitution. Now, by the way, as I mentioned, check out Texas Constitution. You all also have things that revolve around initiatives and referendums. But let me start with this. The recalling of judges. Taft makes the decision. I'm rejecting it. I don't like the idea. They come back a short time later and say, okay, we remove the provisions of recalling of judges. And of course, they're admitted as a state. And shortly thereafter, they amend the Constitution to allow the recalling of judges. Is the recalling of judges a good idea or a bad idea? And if it's a good idea, explain why. If it's a bad idea, explain why. What are your thoughts here? So again, as you think about this, what we're talking about is a judge making certain decisions on the bench, right? He might be an appellate judge and he reverses Roe v. Wade, so to speak. Or he might be a trial judge and he doesn't allow certain pieces of evidence to come into play in the prosecution of a member of the KKK. And as a result of that, that individual ends up walking free. The public aren't happy about that. They aren't happy about that. Terrible decision. And they start to see a trend with this judge. And they say, you know what? Let's put it up on the ballot and let's see if we can get rid of this judge and find a replacement for him.
Good idea.
It's like promoting mob rule under the guise of restricting government at the same time.
How so, Mike? Great comment, by the way.
Just like what you said, removing the judge. It's like they didn't put it in there, so we got accepted as a state. Then they ratified the Constitution to put that in there, and I wonder what else has gone in there. So it's the bait and switch, pull the wool over your eyes. I mean, it's a total. Now that you explain it this way, it's a farce. They allows them to move the goalposts to get whatever they want under the guise of we're limiting ourselves. Wrong. It's hard to put what's going on in my brain into physical words sometimes, and this is it's so many different thoughts. Anyhow, it just sounds like we need to just wipe this Constitution and let you write it to make it fair for everybody.
I'm actually
not joking. I'm actually not joking.
I hear someone chiming in favor. Yes, who is that?
That was Wally. I think I'm in favor. I mean, they're appointed, right? They're not elected. So right there, it could be whoever's in power decides to put his people in. And then two, they cannot be taken out. What other way can a judge be taken out? Maybe for doing something illegal. And today, the Supreme Court did something illegal with Obamacare. They rewrote the law versus just calling balls and strikes, which is what a judge should be doing. So I'm not completely saying, hey, let's take it out, unless you find some other way of getting judges in and then also finding a way of taking them out.
Yeah, Wally, great comment here. And for the purpose of this discussion, I want to focus on the second half of what we talked about, because we could talk about election of judges. Let's not talk about that because it varies from state to state. In Arizona, we vote in our justices of the peace, which are basically our justice courts, right? Low level stuff, misdemeanors and civil stuff. which by the way is a terrible idea. It's a train wreck. But our other judges at the Superior Court level, Appellate Court level, Supreme Court, there's a panel that goes about making recommendations to the governor. Governor appoints, but they're subject to retention by the people every 2 years. So it varies from state to state. I believe, let me just make a quick comment on this. I believe the founders got it right when it came to the judicial branch. And that is, you want to have one branch of government, at least at the outset, that is anti-democratic in nature. And so the founders said, we're going to allow the executive to appoint. And you're right, Wally, there is, how do we hold these people accountable? Can you impeach? Well, yeah, but at the Supreme Court level, we've had one Supreme Court justice impeached in the entire history of our country. And that was in 1804, I believe, Justice Chase was impeached, right? So it's very difficult. And so you bring up a valid point that it is difficult to get rid of a judge that maybe is not following the rules the way the people think that they should be following the rules. Mike, I want to go back to you. Mike, how would you respond to that idea of you saying, well, wait a second, this is we allow judges to go rogue on over a period of time. The executive that's appointing these judges, right? They tend to hold a particular philosophy. How do we hold them accountable if we can't recall? Mike, any thoughts on that?
Honestly, I might get in trouble for my resolution to this because it doesn't involve words. It involves action. And as much as I actually abhor this type of action, it almost seems like this is where it has to go in order to send a frickin' message to stop this crap. Gallows. I'll just say that word right there.
Yeah.
But
I'm not going to go any further, but
No. But Mike, what about this point? Do you believe that the judicial branch should be directly accountable to the people? Because if they should be accountable to the people, then it sounds like you might be siding on this idea of recalling judges. So which is it?
I was kind of confused about what's getting pictured right now with this. With what you said about them changing the Constitution to reflect something, to putting back in something that held them back in the first place, that should be removed, frankly. I mean, why not rewrite the Arizona Constitution in its own way, but to reflect the sentiments of the original United States Constitution?
Well, I understand that, Mike.
I'm to the point where, as you saw a couple of weeks ago, where it's getting very frustrating to get things done. So removing judges or putting, do what's right. Rewrite it so that it's done correctly instead of allowing them to move the goalposts to achieve their ultimate goal under the guise of having them limited. So it's a dog and pony show. I hope that answers what you're saying.
Mike, appreciate you. Thank you, Mike. Brandon, yeah. What were you going to say?
Me? I wasn't going to say anything. I suppose this whole concept confuses me when I'm going to be a little bit off topic, I think. But when we say we don't want mob rule, that kind of thing. But then we say, well, the Constitution and government is effectively, they get their power from we the people, who I assume in this picture is the mob effectively, right?
Yeah.
I just find like kind of an interesting twist. It's like, well, we don't want mob rule, but if we the people have the power, and the government is supposed to, get their power from us, it's kind of
a working contradiction
in a way. Yeah, in a way, it is like a weird contradiction. Yeah.
Well, so let's walk through that. The idea is that the people have established a governmental system, and a part of that governmental system is there's going to be a component where it's going to be democratic in nature. We're going to vote for individuals, but the other side of it is that the people ultimately are concluding that there are certain things that we are not going to allow government to trample upon, right? Free speech, the free exercise of religion. And so basically what you have in the drafting of this document, you have an agreement that there are certain liberties that cannot be infringed upon, regardless of what a majority might say into the future, right? So yeah, I mean, there are, and I don't see them as conflicting. I see, hey, there's one avenue we're going to take where we allow the people to have a voice. There's another avenue we're going to take where we make sure that the rights of all are protected, regardless of whether you fall in the majority or the minority. And so back to this idea of judges.
If we're calling a judge, right?
Yeah, but yeah, for the purposes, it almost sounds, as I'm listening to comments, it almost makes me think that we should have started with this concept of, is it a good idea to have judges elected? Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is whether or not judges should be directly accountable to the people. That really is the issue of the day here. And so let me turn it back over to you guys. By the way, I'm going to be switching over to my phone here. I'm going to be hopping in the car to travel. And give me just a second here. I want to make sure.
I got to do the same.
Yeah, I'll only say I can fill a void with a little bit of speaking here, I guess. But I would only say that if you make judges accountable to the people, and then judges have to then do what they do in a court, against people. Like, it'd be like me going to my boss and saying, "Hey, I don't like you. I'm going to fire you, or I'm going to get you fired." That's like so the judge. If the judge is supposed to make a quote unquote whatever, be logical or be
impartial
fair according to the Constitution. Yeah, unbiased. There we go. Like unbiased. It's like how is a judge going to be able to do that without feeling, I guess duress? This might go back to the whole duress thing, where it's like he has to make a judgment against two people who are going to be part of We the People. And then you bring celebrities and crap into the picture, or some celebrity in Arizona, where it's like, people know he did something wrong, or maybe some people do, and some people don't believe it. The judge condemns him, and then it's like, then 51% of We the People say, this judge is worthless.
Yes.
Hopefully that makes sense. That's the best way.
Brandon, you're right on point, man. You're right on point. Who else was chiming in? I heard someone else trying to chime in.
It seems to me that instead of recalling judges, it would be good if we could impeach judges, because we have to have some way to keep them accountable. They have great power over the lives of everyday citizens, and so we have to have some way to keep them accountable. But at the same token, if they're going to be that not elected, then a recall is more of an elected position. But we need to have something to do to hold them in line.
Well, you know what?
Let me ask you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Can you guys hear me? Okay. By the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just going to say, look at what Ron DeSantis just did with the one of the attorneys in Florida. He said, "Listen, you went against your oath. You're determining what laws you want to enforce and not enforce. No, you said you will enforce the laws of the state of Florida." I think, and that's how a judge should be judged. Are you enforcing all the laws as written? Not as the wave of people like it, conservative today, liberal next month, but as it's written, are you enforcing the laws? And try to take out that, I think, as Brandon said, what's the deal of the day? What's the soup of the day type of thing?
That's the problem. Exactly. That's where I'm going. Yep. Is that people won't see that, though. People will just be like, "Oh, that's my celebrity. I hate that judge." Like that kind of thing. The social aspects of society.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where this is going to fit in, but I had touched base on it being like the contradiction thing. Giving the power to the people and the power to those and so on and so forth. You give them enough power to be effective. However, the limits, the way it's written, or should be written, I believe anyway, should be written to limit them so that it is not abused. In other words, each leg of the table keeps the other one in check. Does that make sense? I just lost sound. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
we're all quiet.
I think.
Oh no, my headset just got kicked.
I think that our judges should be kind of insulated from the popular views, of the public, even though they're elected. I agree with Kathy that, there should be some mechanism to remove them. I think there is. When you have judges at the superior court level or the municipal court level, there's usually a head judge, and there's like a board that meets, and I think they can police themselves. I think they can push out a maverick judge that, isn't following the laws, if I'm not mistaken.
Shane, you are muted.
The judges are all bought and
he's
paid for,
muted.
just like Congress. They're all bought and paid for. They don't follow the Constitution. We have a Congress right now that does not follow the Constitution at all. I mean, 99% of them. I mean, Wally brought up DeSantis, doing something right, and he does, but he's one of the few. Our country is run by a bunch of tyrants, and we know this. And it's our duty to not stand here and take this anymore. When we say that we have the power, what power do we have? I don't see us having any power. Voting in new people. Well, the elections are rigged. We've seen it over and over again. So how do we fix this? Talking about how great the Constitution it is great, but nobody follows it. The people that we elect and put in power, all they become is dictators. That's all they become. So
perhaps you should say the people we think we elect if the elections are rigged.
Exactly.
They've been selected.
Yeah, I mean, guys, listen.
I want to thank you, Mark, for saying that.
We all know what the problem is. We all know what the problem is. That's not why we're gathered here. The reason why we're gathered here is if we're going to win back and restore freedom, restore the republic, and really have impact. The problem is you have a lot of people. In fact, I would say the overwhelming majority of individuals who claim to love freedom and love America and believe that America is unique in a lot of different ways. They don't understand the basic principles of freedom. So the reason why we're here discussing the principle, we haven't even got through the recall of judges. The reason why we're here discussing is because if we're going to win this back, it's going to be led by individuals who understand these principles, right? And what I'm hearing right now, I travel all over the country talking to groups that have the knowledge that they have is it doesn't even rise to the level of a basic knowledge of what it means to be free, what the proper role of government is, and what the Constitution actually means, what it says, and how to use it as a sword and a shield. So we already know that there's a problem, right? And this isn't an echo chamber this is about equipping people with the knowledge that's needed to go out and have impact wherever you're called to have impact. And I think this is if we're going to talk about restoring the republic, the reason why we're on here tonight is we're talking about a principle that's critically important to actually restoring and preserving a republic. And that is, what role do the judges play? If we can't even agree on the role of the judicial branch, let's not pretend like we're going to win back freedom, like we've got a shot. Because you've got freedom folks that disagree, perhaps on the role, right? So kind of just stepping back here for a moment, because I really appreciate the comments. Sometimes, I'm a guy that I know what I've been called to do, and that calling is to educate. And as I go about doing what I do day to day, I oftentimes get a little backlash on, well, Shane, what are you going to do next? No, what are you going to do? I already know what I'm called to do. I'm called to educate. Right. I've known that since I was a very young kid, that's what I would spend my life doing. But we're all the hands and feet of freedom. Everybody's called to do something maybe a little bit different. And I just believe that this education on freedom and the Constitution is critical. And so often we want to bypass it. Well, man, it's time for a revolution. Oh, really? So when you have your revolution and you potentially win, what's this restoration of government look like? I'm proud that you can shoot a gun, but what's the restoration of freedom actually look like? Right? That's the point here, is that when we get this so-called freedom train back on track, what are we doing as liberty-loving Americans? What are we implementing? What are we restoring? And so, guys, I'm ranting a little bit because I think this is so important that we oftentimes miss the forest for the trees on why it's so important to have these intense discussions. Joe, was that you chiming in?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I just want to say both what Mark said and what you just said are right on point. It's very difficult to talk about the issues and the difficulties we are seeing right now, from whether it be from recalling judges and whether or not we should or can, or how we should do that when they're not performing in the manner that they should, in the manner in which they're entrusted. Also, if you want to talk about immigration and the problems that we have with the border and so forth. Part of the and then at the same time, I thought long and hard about if you were to have a revolution, and we all want some sort of a revolution, which by definition just a returning or returning to certain principles. Right. We want things to change, but okay. So if you're talking about all of these issues, how do you fix them? In my mind, how do you fix these? How do you actually ask a government, or how do you ask a judge to enforce laws when the majority of the laws on the books are actually unlawful, that they were enacted over and above the authority that government or the legislature and the people who actually put those laws in place, beyond authority which they actually even had? So you're talking about returning to that. You've got to, like, as you say, you've got to understand liberty and the principles of liberty. And as I always say, when you have a revolution, you're opening a window. And when you open a window, anything can fly in. And if you look at history, the vast majority of revolutions have turned to collectivist types of revolutions. So that's a real problem, and in difference to that, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence was in that way different from any other revolution, any other turning, any other constitutional situation in the history of the world. At the same time, the likelihood is you look at almost every other revolution in the world, when that window came open, it was the people's voice in a manner of speaking, but it was a voice of collectivism. And that's the danger when you have a revolution. That's the danger when you open that window, because those collectivist forces try to put themselves in place. And that's what's happened historically. So you have to be able to understand what the principles are. And essentially, what we deny as a society, we deny the preeminence of the individual. The fact of the matter, the base principle that every single authority in this world comes from the individual. Every legitimate authority in this world comes from the individual, and it's by virtue of his birth. So you want to call it by virtue of his relationship to God, you can call it whatever you want, but it's by virtue of his birth. And there is no other inherent authority. There is no inherent authority in government. There is no inherent authority in 10 men other than the inherent authority in those 10 individuals. And that authority is not cumulative. That's the biggest question on the face of the earth today, is where does authority come from? And most people believe that 10 people have more authority than does a single individual, and it's just not true. So you have to measure what you can and can't do in establishing government. And in my mind, the only legitimate government can do no more than what the individual can do. And the minute that they step beyond that, they're stepping into despotism and tyranny. So you've got to go back to the very basics of what is authority and pure agent government. When it is purely the agent, not of the people, but of the individual, and that the preeminence and ideals and what's important to the individual, which is liberty, life, and free exercise of conscience. And when you go beyond that, when you start creating roads or whatever you want to call it, you've stepped into tyranny. If it's not private, it's tyranny.
And what I like about that, Joe, is right now we have like law enforcement, government agents who actually go beyond individual rights. And that's why somebody commits a small infraction and ends up dead, because police have no restraints.
Thank you.
Instead of just having the restraints of the individual, which means, you can't shoot somebody because they walked away from you when you told them to stop.
People don't understand.
Agents of the government does go way beyond their proper boundaries.
People don't understand that just because you have a uniform or a badge on, you can still do no more than an individual can with or without a badge. It has to be limited to the same thing. What works for one has to work for the other. You can't pull a gun on somebody unless it's in self-defense, and they do it all the time. And it goes right up the line. It goes right from police. It goes to judges. It goes to courts. And you start looking at what they get away with, and we've allowed them to get away with so much for so long. We don't know which end is up and which end is down. Can you recall a judge? A judge should be subject to the people, but what? To the mob rule? Should they be subject to representative rule? What should they be subject to? But when they're corrupted and when they're not allowing the individual what belongs to the individual, then they're completely out of line, and something has to be done about it.
Yeah,
I agree.
So, Joey,
quick things.
So, Mike, I'll let you talk. I got to jump off. I'm jumping into this town hall here. I got to get ready to go. But listen, I want to continue on with this conversation next week. And I want to intermingle the principles with the solution. Because I, as I talk about this whole idea of education, it's not just educating on the principles, it's educating on execution. And so when I hear people think, listen, for me, I don't link arms with individuals that say that we don't have a shot. Why are you wasting your time if you don't think we have a shot? Like, there's so many things going on right now that if these things were to lead out aggressively over the next 2 to 4 years, there's drastic changes that happen. And we'll talk about nullification. We'll talk about interposition. We'll talk about the current makeup of the court. We'll talk about all those things, because there are some things that are happening right now that are unlike anything that this country's seen in the last 100 years in terms of pushing back against the government that's become overreaching, overbearing, and corrupt. So, guys, I gotta tune out. I will see you guys next week. I'm excited, and Wednesday night will allow us to have even more time. But I got to jump out and get ready for this. We're at a new location, and it's going to be pretty crazy tonight. So I may keep this in my ear and kind of listen to you guys, but I've got to tune out now. Thank you, guys.
Right, Shane. Take care. Have a good night.
Shane.
Thanks as always, man.
I actually have to get going in a moment, but I wanted to mention this real quick. Back in the very, very early 1800s, a judge ruled that basically any and all laws passed that are repugnant to the Constitution are thereby null and void.
Yep.
That right there. So we're all going back to the second thing I wanted to mention was, where's the enforcement of that? And the third thing I can't remember, so it's probably irrelevant, but it actually tied right in with this whole thing. The town hall meeting, I can give you an address here in just a moment. Wally. Crap, I wish I had this planned out. It was because I wanted Shane to hear part of this too, at least so we could talk about it when I get to the meeting. Yeah, it's actually just east of Mesa Drive on Southern at the little school next to the roller rink. For those who are in Arizona. Anyhow, thank you guys for coming together again. I wish y'all were here in Arizona. You could hear Shane and see Shane in person do the fire and brimstone on the Constitution.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, it sounds like it would be wonderful.
It's worth a trip if you're ever out here, man.
Yeah, the first time I saw Shane, I had a trip to Arizona scheduled for August, and I heard he was going to be there in September. So, he lives there, but he was going to be teaching a class on the Divine Constitution, and I rearranged my schedule to be there in September instead of August, and it was phenomenal. And I would actually like to lure him into Texas one of these days, and get him out here for us. That would be great. And Brandon, maybe you should get him to New York. I think anywhere we can get a crowd together, he'd go, because his passion is teaching the Constitution, and of course that's our passion, learning the Constitution.
Peace and love to y'all. Fight the good fight. Actions are over words when it comes down to it. We have to take more of a physical action. And I'm not talking about, well, at least just yet, getting our pitchforks and our torches out, because that is coming. As much as we may want to try to avoid it. But anyway, I do have to go. You guys take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next week, and see those at the meeting who are going to the meeting.
All right. Have a blessed night.
Take it easy.
Blessed you.
Yeah, I like the. Go ahead.
One thing that was talked about right at the beginning, he mentioned about Roe versus Wade, which I agree that it should be overturned, and it was. But the thing is you got to look at how our government operates and how our media operates, all combined together. They're two peas in a pod. The timing of this, we are a divided nation more than we've ever been in the history of our country right now. And to bring that out right now and do it right now at this time we got an election that's coming up, midterms that are so important to try to correct some things in this country, get some control back, get some normalcy back to this world, because one side wants this world, or our country, to be nothing, a fragment of what we were. And the other side wants to bring the Constitution back. So division sells, it pays really well. It keeps politicians' pockets lined very well. So when you see things like this come up, Roe versus Wade, you got to question why now? I mean, all you've seen for the last 2 months since this happened was everybody bickering, families just being destroyed and pulled apart from it, just like COVID did, just like the vaccines did, just like masks do. All of this, more division, more division. What we need is something, someone, some people, some groups to come together and unite. And if it means that we unite as constitutional patriots and we take over, then that's what it has to be. I don't know. Maybe that is the case. That's just my thoughts.
It's a tough one. Shoot, I had a point that I wanted to tell you right in the middle of your speech, and I'm already forgetting it. I do want to say though, as far as like the actions versus words thing, that's a very fine line, and I think considering history and again all the talk of revolutions. Oh, I just thought of it now too. You said we're probably the most divided now that we ever have been. Arguably, maybe not other than like the Civil War, the actual Civil War, but I think kinetic warfare, as far as like using guns and bombs to kill each other. I feel like that. I'd hope that's the last thing we want, and we should try and go through words first. But yes, you mentioned the government and the media working hand in hand. People are. Maybe it's just my opinion, but I think a lot of people are brainwashed. I know conservatives who think they're constitutional, but they think the right to bear arms shall not be infringed still means that, certain people aren't allowed to have guns. I personally do not believe that. There's still, there's people who think they're constitutionalists, but maybe it's just me again. I might be one of these people, but when I see the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, I don't think there's any exceptions to that. I really don't. That seems like clear-cut English to me. But there are conservatives who, my friends who are, I don't really get into bad arguments. I'm just like, yeah, dude, I get where you're coming from. You're interpreting it differently. But there are people who still, again, I think Democrats and Republicans, they're the same. I personally think they're probably viewing it, yes, the Democrats or the left thinks that they are the constitutionalists and that they're protecting everyone's right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. As crazy as that sounds to me, I think they may honestly think that. And so here we are, right?
That's true. Absolutely.
But so yeah, we need something like media, but good luck with that. But we need someone, I guess, who has a ton of money who can get platforms going, who I guess for lack of a better term would line more centrist, or I get called this a lot, but libertarian. I don't particularly label myself a libertarian, but I see how people can align me with that label. But yeah, I just see too much of, again, my side, my tribe says this, the left says this, the right says this, my tribe says this, so I'm brainwashed and I just go with it. No words for that. I don't. It's not good. I think it's why we are where we are.
Well, I think that we've had, a century or more of brainwashing. From the time we're in elementary school, we're fed lies until we grow up believing that they're the truth. And then we come to a point where we as individuals start to learn better. Then it's an individual responsibility. We can no longer blame the earlier brainwashing. Then we have to pick up the responsibility for trying to affect change. And I think that's what this is about. And we each have a different role in that. And I know people who absolutely believe that their main thing is that they need to get arms, they need to be prepared for revolution. And like Shane, his calling is to teach,
I agree.
I feel this passion to share the Constitution because I believe that people understand it, then their heart will be changed and they will defend it. I think they don't understand it. I didn't understand it, it's been a growing process. So to me, this has been a calling, even at 70, I can do something. I can reach out and help as many people come to that truth as I can. And as we wake up more and more and more people, that to me, that's the only way we're going to be able to affect change is to empower people with the knowledge.
Right. It's tough. It's very tough. Every person has their own. Yeah, I agree that public indoctrination camps doesn't make any of this crap easier.
And even if it comes to the weapons or something, if they don't have the knowledge, they'll never come to that point. Without knowledge, there's no change ever.
Right. Yeah, people. I think a lot of people have been psychologically or mentally damaged. And again, like when I bring up the Constitution, people are just like, "Oh, it's 250 years old," or "Oh, you're one of those crazy libertarians." And it's like, why you label me with these things? Just come on, like read this, know your history. I feel like a lot of it seems pretty clear to me. The right to bear arms wasn't it supposed to be for tyranny, right? They don't want tyranny. They don't want to see tyranny. They want as much as I wonder how much the founding fathers really believed in violent overthrow of government. Of course, they mentioned overthrowing government, right? Something to the effect of, if a man, what was it? If man can no longer bear the evils, forced upon him by his government, he's, it's his duty to overthrow. Does that mean by violence, by physical violence, kinetic violence?
How about give me liberty or give me death? I think that's exactly what it meant.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that. It's just that's gonna be very bloody. It's gonna be terrible to sit here and think we need to go to civil war.
Look at how much blood we have being flowing flowing in our streets in our major cities right now, because there's crime is out of control because of the current administration, the current people that are running our states. We moved from Minnesota to Arizona in September of last year, where the whole George Floyd crap. I grew up 6 blocks from that area. My neighborhood is completely destroyed, and
Wow.
they don't care. They don't care one bit. You can't go in downtown Minneapolis in the evening, especially if you're white. If you're of color, you might be okay, but if you're white, they want you dead, and they'll come out and say it. So this has happened, and nobody's doing anything about it. No one's caring. I mean, you got law officers in a lot of cities that are literally throwing their hands up and going, "Why should I arrest anybody? Why should I do anything?" We watched it out of the window of our businesses. We watched people go into a Kohl's store right in the parking lot, van loads of people go in and steal clothes, run out and drive away, and nobody did a thing about it. I watched this day after day.
Yeah.
So crime is out of control. People are getting murdered, raped, beaten at unprecedented levels in our country right now, and no one's doing anything about it.
Yeah, you hear the stories.
Yeah.
I think the knowledge is obviously super important, right? Knowledge is power. That's what we say. However, there's people that have lots of knowledge and they still smoke.
Yes.
We know that smoking isn't good for you. So you can have a lot of information and still not have a good action behind it,
Yes,
right? There's
to not
people who
apply
are
it.
overweight, or they just don't feel good about themselves because they don't know who they are, or they're not connected to source or God or whatever that is for you.
Psychology.
So yeah, it's like, how can we get back to an inner knowing? Because I always come to my inner knowing. Always. That's always first. And then knowledge maybe comes in to help me decide on things. But it has to be an inner knowing.
But you have critical
first.
thinking skills. Most people don't.
Yes, that's it actually. Yep.
Well, and you have to be not distracted. You have to be able to listen to yourself and have your own confidence in who you are as a human being, and not give that power away to other people. And that's what a lot of people have done. They've given the power and decision making to other people.
To the tribes. I'll call them the tribes, but yes, the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're sheep. Everyone's sheep, on
so
both sides.
That's one of my.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
So what my job is, I'm an educator in a different way, but I help people empower themselves through learning about who they are and how to stand up and listen to their own intuition, their own being. Listen to what you are saying, what feels right for you, despite anything happening outside of yourself.
Oh, that's fun. I like to try and have this conversation with my wife, and not so much with other people on the internet or in my personal life, like at work and my friends. But I agree with a lot of this, though. It's you got to search within yourself and try to keep to yourself and think through things, and try not to allow external forces or external inputs because then unfortunately that's what you get is you get these media that can taint your thoughts. Oh, crazy racist white guy, does this, and then you find out like all he did was, he wrote a post on Twitter that said, whites aren't racist, and the media went and made him look like he was some terrorist.
Well, it's like the January 6th victims. We really know they're not victims. They weren't terrorists. And probably most of us have seen the videos of the cops moving the barricades and motioning the people in. And yet they are being drugged off in jail, locked up for years without seeing their families one time, anything. And the whole world believes they were terrorists who attacked the Capitol. But we know that's a lie. And so what happens is as we try and stand and help liberty, the press likes to paint us as, crazies and everything. And so it does become difficult fighting a battle for liberty because the press portrays us inaccurately. Because the press is definitely on the side, they're paid little soldiers of tyranny,
It's part of it. It's a battle of I like to think it's a battle of like your mentality or your psychology for everybody. It might even go deeper than that, but but it is exactly that. It's like when the media can mass brainwash everyone, or Twitter can mass brainwash everyone, or YouTube can mass brainwash everyone by saying, "Hey, check out this recommendation that our algorithm put on here," because they use special keywords like like white supremacists and whatchamacallit, birthing persons, and all this crap. Where it's like, so it's very easy because everyone has these little devices where you get all your pop-ups that say, "Oh, check out this thing that's important, to the country right now," and it's a total lie. It's just Twitter says this is important. Everyone look at this and see how evil these people are, and then in all reality, it's not that at all.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's been a lot of fun chatting with you guys. It's always kind of fun to have a little meeting after the meeting when Shane has to cut and run. Unless somebody has something else to bring up, then we're going to go ahead and cut loose for tonight. I'm excited on meeting Wednesday because Shane will have a little more time to say and answer questions. Usually when he cuts out, we're sitting here going, but we have a few more things we want to ask you. So it's kind of nice that you can have a little bit more time. Does anybody have anything they wanted to bring up?
So how do we, because we just heard about this today, someone, referred us, and like, is this the same link all the time? How do we get the time?
It is the same link, and if you would like to put your email, send it in the chat right here, or I can put you on the email list. I send a reminder every week, but it is the same link every week.
Okay.
So, if you want to be happy to, okay, I got it right here. I will put that in here and send that out.
And Kathy, where are you guys at? Where are you located? I feel like I've met you guys before.
I'm actually in Texas. Where are y'all at?
We're in Peoria, Arizona.
Okay, awesome.
I'm in Arizona.
IIRC's in Arizona. We have Texas people here. We have Arizona people. We have New York people. We get people from Idaho. I am one of the state representatives for Texas People's Rights. PeoplesRights.org is an organization that's in 44 states. We believe that there are agents of government who are usurping power out of thin air and granting themselves the right to do that which they are not allowed to do. And so People's Rights is an organization where we band together with like-minded people. And it's structured so that if your rights are infringed upon, then we can send out a text to people in your area who are with common beliefs as you to help stand with you. We haven't had a lot of action in Texas yet, but we do see some states, areas where CPS has moved in to take children. Had that in Texas where CPS was threatening a child, and representatives from People's Rights went out and sat out in their front yard in their car to videotape it, and CPS backed down. We've had CPS involvement many times where they'll send out a text and 10 people from People's Rights will show up with their cell phones to record it. And if a government agent is about to break rules, and there are a lot of eyewitnesses, that backs them down really well. And if they don't back down, we have a set of procedures, which would even include picketing outside of the judge's home or at his church or at his workplace, anybody who is practicing tyranny, we will shed light on that tyranny. And so it's just to help like-minded people stand together to resist tyranny when they are going against our own rules. We like government agents to stay within the boundaries of the Constitution. So,
Arizona's people's rights is going really strong. But if you live in Arizona, I am getting ready to leave to the town where Shane is going right now. And that's right here on Mason Southern. And if you were to send me or give me your phone number, I can send you that information and you can go there in person every Thursday night.
Okay, thank you.
So let me just give you my phone number, and then if you want to text it to me, I will send you back that information.
Thank you, Roxy.
I'm going to write my phone number down there.
put it in the chat. Jeremy, I love that. That's awesome. Okay. So yeah, we want to invite you, if you're not a member, to look at peoplesrights.org, because like I said, we are in most states. And you just by going to peoplesrights.org, you can read everything we're about, because we're teaching people not only to stand together, but what to do to prepare to stand in case of tyranny. What if they tell you you can't go grocery shopping unless you've had that vaccine? Are you going to get the vaccine, or are you going to be prepared with groceries ahead of time? We teach people how to store food. We teach people, how to have a ham radio in case you have communication. We just teach people different ways to be independent and prepared. And then the whole idea is standing together with your neighbors of like mind. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we invited our neighbor and he came on. So Wally's our neighbor.
Good. Oh, great. That was good. Yeah, and
yes,
we had
knows who the crazies are.
Awesome,
we do have lots of guns up here in Peoria.
And we have lots of conspiracy friends.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Where's your tin hat?
Yeah.
I put the People's Rights site right there, peoplesrights.org, so that if you want to do it, and Arizona is going really strong. You would be in Area 1, but Area 1, they're all really big.
We were actually just at a Mexican restaurant today, and there was probably 10 sheriffs there. And afterwards, I told Mark, I said, hey, I'm going to ask them, well, first thank them for what they do, because it's not easy, what the last, several years have gone through police officers. But I also asked them, I said, are you constitutional sheriffs?
Awesome.
I had to ask them, right?
They would have to arrest themselves at that point.
Right? You got to ask. And even if, it didn't matter that I needed to put that out there, put it out there.
Well, your sheriff of Pinal County out there is pretty awesome, isn't he? Isn't that the sheriff of Pinal County, Roxy?
No, she's not in Pinal. I don't believe you're not in Pinal County. You're in Maricopa.
No, Maricopa.
Yeah, you're in Maricopa.
Yeah, but don't you have a sheriff from Pinal County who's just right out there with who's just awesome, amazing?
Yeah, Sheriff Matt. We have a couple.
Yeah.
I think Flagstaff has one also.
Yeah, it's awesome. Anyway,
we met Sheriff Mack at a rally in Minnesota for one of our friends who is a January 6er, a J6er. Wow. She has a restaurant in Minnesota, and she's a single mom with 3 daughters. She's a black gal, beautiful black lady with 3 beautiful black daughters. And she went to all she was there for was to support Trump. And she was on the Capitol grounds out in front. She never even went in the building. And she's been threatened with 30 years in prison, and had her restaurant locked out and shut down. She has a gymnastics studio also that was shut down, locked out. She's been harassed constantly since it happened. And, Sheriff Mack came to a rally to support her, and we met him there, and it was interesting. Nothing really came of it, unfortunately, but because she's still battling the whole thing. And I don't know if she'll ever get out of it, but.
A lot of those things, I don't know about where she's at, but people's rights, a lot of them, if they were coming, and it was Antifa that was coming to his t-shirt shop in Cave Creek, and he pulled his gun on him, and the cops came and they didn't do a darn thing about it. people's rights went there and stood there and they called the cops. And the cops went ahead and arrested the guy because we were there and they had to do it. You know, they can't, you know, it'll go out public. So that's what people rights is about it. We nail them to a cross. So, in a kind way.
Hey, Kathy. What time is the meeting on Wednesday? Is it still going to be, what was it, 7 p.m. Eastern? Or I'm sorry, not Eastern, Central?
Yeah, it's still gonna be at 7 Central. Does that work for most people? I think because you're really late if we go any later, aren't you?
Oh, it's 9:15 for me. That's not that late. I'll be good. I should be good for that. I expect to be. So just double checking.
Okay, yeah, no, as of right now, we have plans to hold it at the same time just to change the date. That way it makes it a little bit better for him.
Oh, that'll be exciting.
I'm gonna head out of here to the town hall to his meeting. Good night, guys.
Yeah, good night.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
like
you.
a good
All right,
Monday.
good night, everybody. See you all Wednesday, huh?
Sounds
Alrighty.
good. Thank you.
Have a blessed week.